Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the BCP Licensing Subcommittee. The first item on this morning's agenda is the election of chair. Can I have a proposal from members for?
Can I propose you as chair?
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence.
And I'll second you, Mr. Flag. Councillor Flag.
Thank you, Councillor Case. Can I ask, firstly, the clerk just to furnish us with the housekeeping arrangements?
Thank you. Please note this meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast up until the exclusion of the press and public, and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. For everybody in the room, please note if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point along Bradley Road under the flyover. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on your laptops. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2 on this morning's agenda, apologies for absence. Jill?
We have no apologies today.
Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Can I ask, first of all, Councillor Williams, do you have any declarations of interest with regards to this morning's agenda?
No, Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Case? Castle, sorry.
Yeah, I have no declaration of interest in this case.
Thank you. Item 4, protocol for public speaking at meetings. A protocol for public speaking at formal meetings in person, meetings of the subcommittee is included within the agenda sheet for this morning's meeting. Moving on then to item 5, simplypleasure.com, 333-335 Holderness Road, Bournemouth. An application has been received for the renewal of the sex establishment licence for the premises known as simplypleasure.com, 333-335 Holderness Road, Bournemouth. As the licensing authority has received 2 objections, this matter is brought before the licensing subcommittee for determination. I will now ask each participant to introduce themselves and state their role. I'm Councillor Flagg, elected chairman for this morning's meeting.
I'm Councillor Lawrence Williams from Littledown, Ryford.
I'm Councillor Brian Castle from Muscliffe and Stroughton Park.
Thank you, members. Just to advise everyone that Councillor Adrian Chapman-Law and Councillor Michelle Dower are the reserved members for this morning's meeting. They are not required to participate as all members are here, but they will remain to observe the proceedings for training purposes, but they will not take any part in the hearing or deliberations. Councillor Sandra Moore is also attending to observe for training purposes as above, and we are joined by Mrs. Sarah Rogers, Senior Licensing Officer, Mrs. Nananka Randall, Licensing Manager. Mrs. Mary Almeida is joining us on Teams this morning, who is the legal advisor to the subcommittee. Miss Jill Hollyoak, who's the clerk to the subcommittee, and Miss Rebecca Rhodes, who's the Democratic Services, who's observing for training purposes this morning. I understand on behalf of the applicant, we have Mr. Tom Clark, who's joining us on Teams, and objector 1 on this morning's agenda is Mrs. Susan Stockwell. Objector 2 wishes to remain anonymous and is not attending, but members will be aware that we have received the objection copy of the full objection letter. Before I run through the procedures, please may I check that all persons who have given notice of their intention to speak have been identified, and any person who wishes to withdraw a representation or wishes not to speak has been identified. If there are no comments, I will take this as correct. I will now explain the proposed procedure and order of speaking for the hearing as follows. The licensing officer presents the report. Questions of the licensing officer by all parties, members of the subcommittee to go first. Applicant will make their application. Questions of the applicant by all parties, members of the subcommittee to go first. Objectors will make their representations. Questions of the objectors, members of the subcommittee to go first. All parties will be given the opportunity to sum up, with the party who spoke last, that is the objector, to go first. The hearing will then conclude. The subcommittee will deliberate in private with the legal advisor and a clerk present. Notification of the subcommittee's decision will be given where possible within the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day or the last day on which the hearing was held. The notification of decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate. I will now ask all parties to confirm agreement on those proposed procedures. If not, please make representations. Tom Clark, are you happy with that?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Stockwell?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Sarah Rogers?
Yes, thank you.
Alex Randall?
Yes, thank you.
And Mary Almeida?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Finally, please may I remind all parties speaking not to repeat the information which they have already given in writing, but to expand on their written representations. All questions are to be asked through the chair, and there will be no cross-examination of parties. I will now ask the licensing officer to present the report. Mrs. Rogers.
Thank you. Application is made by Mr. Tim Hemming of ABS Holdings for the renewal of the sex establishment licence for a further 12-month period. Apologies, my report stated that the applicant is ABS Holdings. However, Mr. Hemming is the CEO of that company and he is the applicant. The premises have been operating as a sex shop for the last 20 years, during which time no complaints or issues have been reported to us. The applicant keeps records up to date with changes in staff and management as and when this requires, and we've no cause of concern. The application made complies with the relevant legislation, and the necessary site newspaper notices were published in accordance with that legislation. As a result, 2 objections were received. The objectors did not give their consent to be identified. However, one objector is in attendance today and therefore has been advised that they will be identified during the course of this hearing, and obviously they've introduced themselves. No objections were received from any of the responsible authorities who were also consulted as identified under the Licensing Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Rogers. Members, do you have any questions for the officer at all? Councillor Williams?
Not at this point, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Castle?
No, not at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Just have one question. Can you just confirm that there have been no complaints made to the licensing officer?
No, none.
Thank you very much. Can I call on Mr. Clark to make your application?
Can we just check?
Oh, sorry.
Any questions, please?
Sorry. Mrs. Stockwell, did you have any questions for the licensing officer at all?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Mr. Clark, just before you introduce your application, do you have any questions for the licensing officer at all?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Please address the committee.
Hi there. Yeah, so basically what I'd like to do today is just be available for the councillors to hopefully answer any questions that you may have as best as I can do. I'd like to look through the 2 objections, if I may, and just answer some of those directly, hopefully anticipating some of the questions which you may have. The objection number 1 by Mrs. Stockwell. The objection seems to be about the location being unsuitable. The location hasn't, the environment hasn't significantly changed in the last year or in the last few years, and so I don't see any significant issue there, as there has been no changes to the local environment. An objection seems to be about illegal parking. As far as I understand, we're not responsible for the parking around the store, but I do understand that all the way down Holdenhurst Road, people do park on the backside of the pavements to access all the local stores down that road. We have spoken to the local traffic wardens, and they have advised us and all the other stores in the area that there is no problem with this, as long as the footpaths are easily accessible for pedestrians, then there is no problem. If that does change, then obviously the traffic wardens should act accordingly. There is a comment about the windows being indecent. All the windows have dressed mannequins in, fully dressed. Nothing different from what you would see in a Marks and Spencer's window or any kind of lingerie store. There's certainly nothing obscene in the windows, as far as I would understand the term to be, and I don't understand that clothing can be described as obscene. There is also a comment on the access to our website, simplepleasure.com. There is actually a filter as you go into the website, which requires age verification. So that isn't mentioned, but that is the case on our website. There is also a comment about the local demand for such a store. Happily, there is a local demand for such a store, which is great for us and our staff members. There is a comment also about the triggering of sexual harassment of women and girls. Thankfully, over 50% of our customers are women. So I'm not quite sure how that may be the case. And also our store does get a lot of trans customers, it gets a lot of gay customers, it gets a lot of people from the LGBTQ community in the store, where they are able to come into the store and talk about any issues that they may have, and be a little bit of a safe space for them. So can I just check my connection is still good?
Yes, no problem.
Yes, sorry, as legal advisor,
Hello?
can I just ask Mr. Clark, would you present the application you're making as well as going through the objections? As you started going through the objections, maybe you finish with objection 1, but just confirm you're applying obviously to renew the sex license, the shop license for a year, and the
We are,
reasons
correct.
for that.
Yeah, we absolutely are looking to renew for a further year.
Thank you.
Am I okay to continue, or would you like to move on?
Yes, please carry on.
Okay, thank you. The second objection, well, objection kind of 1.1 from Mrs. Stockwell, a little bit hard to follow, so perhaps the councillors may pull out some direct questions for me. I can do my best to answer, but a little bit meandering. There seems to be a comment about the some of our stores sadly closing. That has been the case, unfortunately. Some of our managers, staff members have lost their jobs and created hardship for them. So unfortunately, yeah, we have unfortunately had to close some of our stores, which has been a difficult time for those staff members directly involved in that. We have no 3 to 335 where this license is looking to be renewed. Objection number 2 from Anonymous. Similar points from Mrs. Stockwell, I believe. The council has previously approved the simplepleasure.com name to be above the store, so that hasn't changed in the last year. It talks about under 18s attending the store. We have the required signs outside the store and inside the store advising anybody what they may be seeing as they walk into the store. 18s and above are only allowed into the store, and we operate challenge 25 as well. So anybody who appears to be 25 or under, we do require their ID, and you know, we only accept IDs that recognise passport, driver's license, that type of thing. Anybody under 18 or are not able to prove their age, then we do remove from the store. Again, this objection talks about the windows, which I believe I've answered, and they mentioned the sorry, 2 seconds. Oh, they talk about the website again. They've obviously had a really good look through the website and found some things on the website that we sell. It's the same products you'd find on Amazon. Amazon sell the same products. I don't think they object to the advertisement campaign from Amazon or their fleet of trucks that carry their advertisement around the country. They sell the same products we do. The business name of Prowler is also mentioned. There seems to be a misunderstanding and miseducation of what the word prowler actually means in the gay community. So in the gay community, to go on the prowl means to be going out for drinks with friends, to be maybe looking to hook up with somebody. It's a term used in the gay community. It's not a negative or aggressive word. Certainly the charities that we've linked with in the past have no problem with the word prowler. Terence Higgins Trust, Stonewall, National AIDS Trust, among others, have all been quite happy to carry the prowler word. And it's not in the understanding of what the anonymous objector number 2 has talked about, but actually it's a term used in the gay community for certainly nothing nefarious. So hopefully that's as much as I can do, but if there is any further questions, happy to answer anything the councillors may have for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Members, do you have any questions at all? Yes. Councillor Williams.
Good morning. Last year I think it was me that complimented you on your advertising. Has anything materially changed in your licence application in the last 12 months?
No, nothing.
Thank you.
Councillor Castle.
No, I have nothing at the moment.
Thank you. Mr. Clark, we were given some images of advertising, which unfortunately I can't access on my laptop right at this point in time. Can you just confirm to me what you actually advertise in your windows? Do you actually advertise anything in the windows, or is it purely just to say that it's the establishment?
We advertised lingerie in the window. The images that were attached to one of the objections were screenshots of possibly our website, possibly another website. There were images of pictures which we would not put in the window. In the window is dressed mannequins.
Thank you for confirmation of that. Any further questions, members? No. Mrs. Stockwell, did you have any questions for Mr. Clark?
I do have a question, yes.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Hello. Sorry, I've lost you for a moment there.
Okay. Is that coming through okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yes. I just wanted to check whether because you've looked at my objection, whether you'd actually also had the email that I sent to the officer from November the 9th, which expands my initial objection.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I called that objection 1.1.
I
where
see.
You talk. That was the part of the objection which I felt a little bit difficult to follow, which had talked about our unfortunate situation of closing some of our stores. But yeah, I did receive that one. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stockwell. Do officers have any questions for Mr. Clark at all?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Right, we now move on to the objectors. Will you kindly make your representation to the committee, please, Mrs. Stockwell?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to start by saying that Mr. Clark has almost read my mind and taken the words out of my mouth, because the first thing I've got on my list of what to say is I'm here primarily for questions, so 2 minds, 1 thought. So that's my main reason for being here rather than going through everything. I'd also like to read this and this to you from the case law on whether moral objections. Is that acceptable? can be made. I just want to make a representation on law.
Can I just ask Mary to confirm on this? Because I was of the understanding that moral objections were not upheld in terms of sexual establishments, and is that correct, Mary?
Ms Stockwell, be advised, I will obviously be with the councillors, and if you haven't raised it as part of your objection prior to now, I don't think we could allow it now. I will be with the councillors during their decision-making process, and we'll go through all the relevant legislation with them.
Yes, of course. And this isn't on a new point of fact. This is just the law that I believe applies to the issue of location, because there is considerable confusion nationally at this sort of
Sorry, and
licensing.
what is it you're
Oh,
referring
it's
to?
just a report of ex parte Christian Institute, the Newcastle case.
Okay. And has a copy of that been provided to the board and to Mr Clark?
No, it hasn't.
Okay, I think we'd need a chance to have a quick look at that before we determine whether it's relevant. Have you got copies that can be emailed?
No, I haven't, but I can refer Butterworth's local government reports, 2001 LGR. And I mean, it's the leading case on morals, so as far as I'm aware, so I'm sure it's reported elsewhere as well.
Yeah, sorry, the name of the case?
Ex parte Christian Institute, and in full Crown versus Newcastle on Tyne.
Thank you.
So it's a judicial review case.
Okay, I'll have a look at that, Miss Stockwell, and perhaps while I'm doing that, the questions could be, if you've, apart from that, if you finish, then perhaps you could, questions could be put.
Yes, it's just a couple of lines. So there was a suggestion that the authority could take into account what he called, this is the party that wasn't successful, the moral case against the activities, as our chair's rightly said. In my judgment, it does no such thing. What it entitles the local authority to do is to have regard to the character of the relevant locality, and no doubt take into account, if it be the case that there is a strong body of feeling in the locality which objects to the existence of a sex shop in that locality. Equally, paragraph D makes plain that in addition to the character of the relevant locality, the use to which any premises in the vicinity are put is also a relevant consideration. And this is the part I want to emphasise. Thus, for example, it might be perfectly reasonable to refuse a licence for a sex shop which is in the vicinity of a school or some religious building. That is a recognition that sex shops may attract a particular clientele whose presence may not be considered desirable in some areas. And that is something, again, which can be taken into account. But it has nothing to do with the morality of sex shops as such. It is the effect on the locality and on those living nearby which has to be taken into account, and that is the distinction which is drawn. Thus, straightforward objections on the ground that sex shops should not be allowed to exist have no part to play. And then it goes on saying the local authority, as Chair's already said, cannot take into account a complaint about the morals of running a sex shop, but you can look at the morals of the people who, some of the people, I don't say all of Mr. Clark's clientele, may be causing problems in the area. And as an example of customers that Mr. Clark and Mr. Hemming's shops may attract into an area, I have cited, and it was rather glossed over by the applicant in my email, which is part of your bundle, the situation in the window in Rochdale. I was hoping Mr. Clark might be able to answer that. The Rochdale store, at the time of the first of still ongoing cluster of cases of grooming of underage girls. In the first trial, which you may have seen in the press, during the time of that trial, when some people who'd been underage at the time of the offences that were being tried, the humiliation which they'd received was compounded by the applicant, because they chose as their window display, and I've seen this reported in the press, I've seen a picture of it, the only thing in that window display was the picture of a schoolgirl uniform costume, utterly ridiculing the women who'd come forward to complain and continue to come forward in that part of the country. That's the sort of people that shop, which is no longer there, I'm pleased to say, are seeking to appeal to. I'd also like to draw your attention on the issue of street harassment to a campaign which you may have seen publicised as councillors by girls in Bournemouth against street harassment. Now, I say that that campaign of chalking messages on the ground would not exist and would not be publicised on your local authority's website if it wasn't a serious problem. Street harassment of girls going down to as young as 11 is an issue in the area, and I say that a display of clothing which is designed to stimulate sexual activity, and I mean anyone can see this in Google Street View in the windows going back over the years, is likely to lead to harassment. If there's a mixed sex group of teenagers at the bus stop opposite, it will trigger harassment. The other people that I think could be a problem coming into a sex shop, particularly in this area, and I call on you to draw on your local knowledge of the neighbouring Springbourne area, is the risk that some people, not the entire clientele at all, I do not say that this is what we're restricted to Mr. Clark's clientele, but some people in that area will be using the product sold as their stock in trade as sex workers. And from my own experience being brought up in Southampton, where we had people drawn into sex work quite significantly, it's just 30 miles away, you probably know, that as a teenager, I had the experience certainly of being approached by several people, one I'd been at school with, in fact, who were involved in that work and were keen to recruit into the industry, as it were. Now, I reiterate that I don't suggest that Mr. Clark's clientele consists entirely of people who use products as stock in trade for prostitution, but I do say that a significant enough number do, that this is an issue for you to consider whether youngsters in the area will be approached. And I hope that in reading from the case that you can see you do have the power to consider that issue of the people in the area and the effect on the area. I probably don't need to refer you to the press reports in nearby Southcote Road of ongoing issues with prostitution, because it's just so well known locally. We've also seen in the last couple of years the Sexual Health Centre for Bournemouth, the main one, moving to about 10 minutes walk away from the establishment, and that's why I referred you to the effect on the area. That this is what I say is the knock-on effect of a sex establishment being licensed there. 2 minutes walk away, a building with a full-scale, i.e. the same size as a woman, image, 2 images of a woman displaying nudity for a local spa. on the outside. And I say again that this is the effect that the presence of a sex shop has on the character of the area. And that's all. Thank you. I'm sure I can rely on you to have read through everything that's in the back.
Thank you, Mrs. Stockwell. Firstly, can I say that your point that you raised about case law, I'm sure that the legal advisor will brief us in the private session when we're making our decision with regards to that point. I note from the agenda item that the application was consulted with Dorset Police and they had no observations or objections was received. So I was just concerned with regard to your point that you raised, saying that people were being accosted in the street. Do you have any written
Chair,
evidence?
I didn't say, I didn't intend to indicate that I had evidence people actually are being accosted in the street. I do say that you don't need evidence of that. You can use your knowledge of the area and your, I think, conjecture.
Okay, I think we know where we
But
are.
there is, I mean, I can refer to case law on that you do have the power to
No, I'm fine.
get in ahead of any ghastly thing
So
being proved to you.
I'll ask members, do we have any questions for Mrs. Stockwell? Councillor Williams?
No, thank you.
Councillor Castle?
No, thank you, not at the moment.
Mr. Clark, did you have any questions at all for Mrs. Stockwell?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, yes. So I've just been reminded that there were 2 objections to this application, and the second application was anonymous, and I can confirm that members are aware of that objection, and it has been read by all members of the committee. Okay, moving on then. I think we'll move to the summing up, and can I ask Mrs. Stockwell, if you'd like to sum up, please. Perhaps there's some items that you failed to bring to the committee's attention, but I'll be grateful if you did not repeat yourself. Thank you.
Just to sum up, I would say it's a matter of public record if you include the Google Street View as public record, i.e. something in the public domain and available to anyone to see as to what is actually in the window in Bournemouth's sex shop at remaining sex shop at Holdenhurst Road. Anyone can see for themselves that there's nothing like what is in an M&S window. And I think that really sums up what I say about this place. No advertising to children of sex shops. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stockwell. Mr. Clark, is there anything else you'd like to bring to the committee's attention before we retire to consider your application?
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to just summarise what the licence report said. We've had the licence for 20 years. There's no complaints or issues raised from any governing body. The police have no issues. There is no reality of issues there, and there's no cause for concerns as given by the licence report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Okay, so we're at the point now where the subcommittee will deliberate in private with the legal advisor and Clark present. Notification of the subcommittee's decision will be given where possible within the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day or the last day on which the hearing was held. The notification of decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate. I will now conclude the hearing.
Sorry, Chair, would you like me to summarise the rights of appeal before we finish?
Yes, please.
Yeah,
Mary,
so
thank you.
if the application for renewal is refused, the applicant may appeal the decision within 21 days of notification to the Magistrates Court, unless it was refused on ground C or D above at reasons for recommendation, in which case the applicant can only challenge the review by way of judicial review. It should be noted that BCP Council sex establishment policy was quashed by way of judicial review in February of last year. Essentially, the court were of the view that some consultation responses had been considered by the council as based purely on moral views and not equality. No decision has yet been made whether a new policy is to be developed by way of the licensing committee. Licensing authorities are not bound to have a sex establishment policy, and non-existence of the policy does not prevent an application being considered on its merits in accordance with legislation. With regards to the objectors, if they wish to challenge any decision made, they can make that via an application for judicial review. And please note the council are also bound under its duty under section 149 of the Equality Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you for that. Right, I will now conclude the hearing, and all parties may now leave, and the decision will be conveyed to you in writing as explained earlier. Thank you, Mr. Clark. Thank you, Mr. Stockwell.
Thank you.
Moving on then, members, to item 6 on this morning's agenda, exclusion of the public and press. In relation to the items of business appearing below, the subcommittee is asked to consider the following resolution: that under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business, on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 1 and 2 in part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, and that the public interest in withholding the information outweighs such interest in disclosing the information. I will now, if members are in agreement to that, I will now ask the clerk to end the live stream.